You're surprised the prospect said no? Of course they said no. Hey everybody, before we start this episode, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Perfect RIA. How could it not be brought to you by the Perfect RIA? But if you enjoy these episodes, if you think that Micah and I, or at least Micah, have some great advice to give, head over to our website, theperfectria.com, and download one of our free guides towards making your practice better. So it's not just the things you hear on the podcast, it's the things that you implement. And if you're saying, you know what I'd really like to get in a room with Matt and Micah. I'd really like to ask them my own questions. I'd like to be coached by them. Then send an email to lifestyle@theperfectria.com, and one of our great team members will reach out to you and tell you more about the program.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and with me, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. What's going on, bud?
Mike, I'm great. I'm excited for
you
the new year.
You just refer to yourself in the third person?
Yeah, like Jarvis is good today. Jarvis is good today. Jarvis says, welcome to the new year. Yeah, one of those days. Apparently it was a late night. So yeah, excited to be here in the new year, right? Excited to be setting new goals, working on doubling our practices yet again, but also really excited, Mike, to be talking about what is probably one of the most important parts of a practice, but also the most difficult and potentially soul-crushing, which is the prospecting process.
Yeah, and boy, to start this off, apparently this podcast is just about me correcting what Jarvis says, because it's not about setting new goals. It's about crushing the goals you should have already set, right? So if you haven't set goals, well then fine, but you should have already had these set last year. We want to roll into the year knowing what we're going to do. I don't start a road trip by hopping in the car, driving 10 miles and figuring out, where do I want to go today, right? No, it all starts before you do that. So hopefully you already got these goals set. If you don't have these goals set, then right now hit the pause button, go to your calendar in November, set a date between September and November of this year to set your goals for the following year for 2025. Really important to do that. Sorry to get all preachy right off the gate on that one.
You're good. It's good. Well, since we're up on the soapbox, as you're looking at your goals for this year, another place that goes wrong. So one is waiting too long to set them. The other is that they're these really vague, like wishy-washy. Like an advisor messaged me the other day, says, Jarvis, great news. My goal for this year is to bring in 100 million of new assets. Okay, that's not a goal. That's just a pipe dream. Like that's an aspirational thing, right? What do you because I pulled his ADV, of course. He's got 20 million of existing assets. All right, 5Xing your firm in 1 year would be insanely impressive. But unless behind that you have, I'm going to call 100 prospects a day, there's just no chance you're going to get there, right? Yeah. So we need to make sure that we're translating our aspirational to what am I going to do day in and day out? And then to this podcast today, how am I going to make sure it's actually working, right? Mike, to your car analogy, no matter how fast I drive in the wrong direction, I'm not ever going to get where it is I'm trying to go.
Yeah, it just takes 34,000 miles later. How long is the Earth right around? Yeah. So with this is just like super important. We got to know what these goals are, right? Yep. We got to really come to them in order to play and to play hard with these things. It is great to have aspirational goals, but Jarvis, to your point, I shot myself in the foot for years, right, with my practice about I'm going to be $1 million next year, and I wasn't even making 30 grand, right? But it was like set big goals, and it was like, all right, think big. And I would do these things, but I had no way of actually achieving them. And it was so friggin' demoralizing, and I wouldn't get anywhere. Once I step back and says, hey, that's kind of an end goal where I want to get, but in the short term, here's some building blocks I need to do to get there. Everything was able to change in my life, right? Because I was able to see the finish line and be able to achieve it. So that's really, really important when we're setting those goals. It's great to have those aspirational ones, but we got to dial it back and say, what are things I can do? It's okay to have stretch goals, but not trip and fall goals. We don't want those. What are the stretch goals that are there? And what's the range of success that we need to do? And boy, before we get too much on goal setting, I guess this is supposed to be about prospecting, isn't it?
It translates through, right? But I do want to highlight one more thing, right? On those aspirationals, and Micah, you and I have talked about this for years on the podcast, right? I remember I used to always keep on my computer screen, I would keep a picture of a Tesla, which was my goal car to have. I kept a picture of a lake that I wanted a house on, which I ended up doing. And I had a picture of an income goal that I wanted for my tax return. And all three of those became reality. But I had to translate them. And this is where we'll get back to prospecting. I had to translate them to, at the time it was, I'm going to make 10 phone calls every single day. Now, not necessarily cold calls because I didn't have the courage for that. But I just had, I would get up every morning and I would have 10 phone calls. And sometimes, Micah, I would whip out and those would be 10 phone calls to clients. That's still better than 0 phone calls. Sometimes it would be more effective and it would be phone calls to centers of influence or prospects or people I knew in the community or anyone. But that's how I translated the someday I want to own a Tesla. Today I'm going to make 10 phone calls.
Jarvis, I love that. Now, one of the things to think about with this, right, when we're translating these goals, when we're kind of going through this, is knowing what our real numbers are.
Yes.
So what it comes to, I was working with an advisor at the end of last year, and he's like, hey, I want to bring on X amount of new clients this next year. I want to bring on 25 new clients. He's a growing advisor. I was like, dude, that's fantastic.
Perfect. Yeah.
How many clients have you brought on this year? Where did they come from? And what's your close ratio? And his eyes kind of got a little wide. I was like, oh, you don't track any of these things yet. And it was like, okay, great. We're going to start, right? Time machine's broken. Nothing I can do about what you didn't do in the past. So let's go back and pull these numbers. So if you do not know these, if you don't have evidence to prove what you think is true, you need to do this exercise, which is number one, we're going to go back and say, how many clients did we actually bring on this last year? Our definition of a client is they've signed the engagement and paid the fee. Right? If they've done that, they've come on as a client. If they've said yes and we don't have signed agreement and a fee paid, both those two things have to happen. They are not a new client. So what are our hard and fast rules? How many new clients did we bring on this last year? Then I want to step it back and it says, okay, great. How many from those new clients, where did they come from? Right?
Yes.
What's the source that they came from? Then I want to step it back a little bit more, Jarvis, and say, all right, from that source they came from, what were the total number of prospects that I saw this last year? And if I want to go even above that, I'll say total number of prospects that called my office, right? Because every step of this funnel, there's a drop point that's going to be there. But if I just take how many prospects that I meet with, where did they come from, and how many became clients, I have some great information here. Number one, I know my conversion rate. Now, why is your conversion rate so important? This advisor says, I want to bring on 25 new clients this next year. That's fantastic. How many prospects do you need to see to bring on 25 clients? Well, 25. Probably not, right?
That would be impressive, yeah.
That would be impressive, right? Probably not. What is that number? Okay, then we find out your closing ratio is 30%. Okay, great. Well, now we can back into the math and saying you need to be able to see, I don't know what that math is, but 80 clients or whatever your prospects in order to break down to that 25 clients that you want to bring on this next year. Now we need to look at the calendar and say, great, where do you have time for 80 prospect slots on your calendar, right? All of this stuff we got to start breaking into. That's even before we've started pushing prospecting just yet, by the way.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's critical that this list be very simple, like an Excel document, and it has to have real names on it. It cannot, and here's a couple places where this comes into play, Micah. As you know, one is as advisors, we just do not have a good grip on this numbers. Whatever number you think is in your mind, that number is wrong. Promise you it's wrong. Whatever report you pulled from CR, also wrong. Needs to be... needs to be the names, right? It needs to say like Bob and Sue. They're paying an annual fee of $15,000. They came from a referral. They came back. You're laughing because you know it's right.
It's so true. I'm dying over here because we just pulled a report for the CRM that the team gave me. And I looked at it. I was like, it's wrong. And they're like, no. We pulled this from CRM. I was like, I'm not disputing where it came from. It's wrong. And we had to go back through and relook at it, and how they set up the filters was incorrect. And it was the wrong data. So yes, that really struck a chord with me, Jarvis. Just because you run it from a CRM does not mean it's accurate.
Yeah, we want to see the real names. The other thing this is really going to help you with, right? One is realizing flawed CRM. When you come and you work with Mike and I, right? Or you're at a conference and you're talking to other top advisors, not clowns, but top advisors, right? And if you can show me these numbers, say, hey, Jarvis, because if you come to me or to Mike and say, hey, I'm not getting on enough new clients, and that's all the information you give me, I can't do anything with that. If you come though and you say, hey, listen, I brought in 7 clients and here's where they came from, and I met with 47 prospects and here's the ones that said yes or no, and I talked to this many leads, wow, now we can fine tune this thing, right? We coached an advisor, Micah, one time, and he said, listen, I'm getting a lot of DIYers coming in. They're coming in, they're just picking me for free information. And he was able to show us, like, here's the 15 people that came in and here's exactly what they said. Okay, perfect. We either need some combination of a filter to filter out people who are not looking for a financial advisor. That's easy to do. Or we need to improve your prospect process so it gets them aware of why they need an advisor. Made a couple of tweaks to this. His close rate went through the roof. Has a phenomenal practice now. But had he not had that data, we would have nothing to go with. He probably would have said, make more cold calls. Who knows what? You've got to have that data if you're going to make progress here.
Yeah, data matters, right? The other thing I'm going to add to this is this is data I always have my team pull, right? Because for 2 reasons. One, I want my team to know these numbers and to be able to come through them. I want to QC them, but I don't want to create them, right? Because I don't want to put me in the position of fudging numbers. And really, that's what's going to happen, right? I'm going to be in there like, well, Bob said he was going to sign up as a client, and I'm sure that payment's going to come through, and I'm just going to mark yes on it. Nope, that's not it. So my team has these hard and fast rules of what it's going to be. My job is to QC this. That 2 reasons. I want them to know where these clients come from because they see things that I don't see as well. So bringing them on board in this numbers finding experience is really, really important. Also, good distinction here. This is a time where we separate our roles, ops and RM. Relationship managers, at least in my office, are fantastic at talking to clients. They're fantastic about understanding the heartbeats, understanding what's going on, getting that communication, working with them. They are not good at spreadsheets. So I don't have my RM do things I know she is going to be really bad at. I'm going to pair her up with an ops person who's fantastic at spreadsheets, but can't talk to people to save their life, right? So that ops person is going to be like do the back end stuff, and the RM person is going to, help with the heartbeat side of it. So you pick the right team member to make sure is helping out with this.
Yeah, now if you're an office of one, right, an advisor plus an assistant,
sure.
That's just life, right? That's how we all started. That's what you got to just work with. But you've got to have those names. I was recently in Micah, an advisor's office, several hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. I happened to be there for his weekly stand-up on the prospect process. And there was a printout of the spreadsheet that every advisor and team member was holding. And they went through name by name, Bob and Sue, Jane and Dave, whatever it is. Where are they at? What's our next step? What assets are in flow here, et cetera. And it was old school. And I asked him, I said, hey, Paul, why this is old school? He says, yeah, it is old school because it works.
It works.
And there's this piece that comes up to never talk about numbers from your practice unless you have those numbers. Because what happens is I say, how many clients did you bring in? And let's say the actual number is 7, but you've said 7 enough times, it's rounded up to 10. Actually, it might be 15. It's probably 22. And we see this, right, Micah? Advisors, I brought in 22 clients. Cool. What are their names? Oh, there's 3. There was 3 people. It was 3 people. 3 is still success, by the way. 1 is a success. But if you tell yourself I brought in 20 and then you go to cash that check and there's no money there, we got a big problem.
I love it. I'm just writing that note down. I love that old school process. Man, I'm going to start using some of that stuff. So yeah, Jarvis, I love that. You got to know what these numbers are. You got to know where they came from in order to build where we're going to be. The other thing I want to focus on right here is one of the things that I love to do is I love to look at where are we getting clients. That's where I want to focus my energy. Now, one of the things that comes up, sometimes I don't, well, not sometimes, all the time. This next year, I have no idea where my clients are going to come from. I have a guess and I have places I'm going to put energy, and I'm always putting energy into multiple places, right? You got to shake several trees and you're not sure exactly what's going to fall out. But I'll give you one example.
Several being 2 or 3, not 12.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes. I like 3 proven success things that we're going to be focused on, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we're crushing those 3 and we want to experiment with a 4th, that's the valve I give my team to be able to think about. But we don't even get to talk about the 4th one until we're crushing 3 of them.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so what are those 3 things? It could be referrals, centers of influence, cold calling, seminars, webinars.
Networking, content creation. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of the things that it could be, but what are the top 3 things? The only thing every advisor needs to do across the board is going to be referrals. Referrals is something that every single advisor does. Now, with referrals, kind of the thing to think about, there's a lot of time this could take for you to go through. This is where an assistant is going to come in really nicely and to be able to help with this side of it, because there's a lot of communication that can help with clients that you don't have to do that will help you with referrals. Maybe it's a new client gift you're going to give out when new clients come in. Do you have a process for that? If you don't, this is where a team member is going to be able to come in and help with that. If you don't have a team member, Jarvis, that's why we partner with Belay.
Yeah, indeed we do. In fact, Belay is one of our longtime sponsors of this podcast. In fact, let's pause for just one moment for a word from our sponsors of the podcast. Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Belay. You know, the best part of having a virtual assistant from Belay is not the things that they get done that you were already going to do. That is valuable, by the way. It's that list of things that, if we're being honest, you need to get to and you're just never going to get it done. Like that doctor's appointment you keep meaning to schedule, or the contractor you need to find for your house to fix that leaky thing, or the flowers you keep meaning to send to your wife. Those are all things that you can give your Belay virtual assistant so that they get done, because we know that, if we're being honest, they're probably not going to get done. Now, how are they going to get done? Because Belay finds virtual assistants, including my own virtual assistant, who are masters at working down task lists. They're masters at taking one step ahead of what you're already thinking, right? Reach out to Belay, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get a free copy of their ebook more importantly, to get introduced to my good friend Teresa, who's going to see if you're a good fit for a virtual assistant. Not everyone is. And then find a virtual assistant who's perfectly matched to your needs. So text the letters RIA to 55123. And now back to the episode. All right, welcome back. So Micah, let's dive into this a little bit more. And of course, there's only so much we can cover in our 30-minute podcast or so, but you've got these 3 channels. Now, again, the way to pick these 3 channels, and referrals should always be one of them, pick the 3 channels is either where you're actually going to do the work. So for example, if you say, hey, one of my channels is going to be writing blog posts and you're terrible at writing, that's not a channel for you. Podcasts, and I hate doing them, that's not a good channel for you. So it needs to be a channel where you're passionate. And then the other is where you're getting results. When we go back to that list that we just beat up on, and it says, hey, every single new client I brought on came from my networking in the community, that's where I need to spend my time. Starting a blog is not going to help you there.
Yeah, and let's define that a little bit more, Jarvis. I'm spot on with you, right? If you go through all these lists of prospecting activities and you don't like them, too bad. Like there's this aspect that none of these call to me, I'm going to invent my own system. No, too bad. Suck it up. If you want to be successful takes work. It is also requires being uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. If networking is the primary source of your clients, but you got 3 clients out of there and your goal was 20, okay, it's a leg, but I'm not putting 100% of my energy in there because it's not producing enough. So how do you know it's producing enough? Is it meeting your goals? At the end of the day, it's not about how many new clients I bring on, Jarvis brings on somebody else. Is the activity you're doing producing the fruit to achieve your goals or not? If it is, well, fantastic, keep doing it. If not, we have to add to it or we have to tweak it. It's one of those 2 things.
Now, Micah, something that comes up here, and I know we're bouncing around just a little bit, and we're going to go into great detail on this during an upcoming masterclass that we're going to be releasing on the Prospect Process Nation webinar for everyone who listens to the podcast. We're going to talk about how to double your practice. But something we've got to look at here, and this is where almost every advisor falls flat in every marketing channel, is they look and sound like every other advisor. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, I look a lot better than you 2 clowns. And that's probably true. That's probably
That's a low bar, though. That's a low bar.
That is a low bar. And I know that your mother thinks that you are a special and unique snowflake, but to a prospect, we all look and sound exactly the same. And some advisors get really hung up, and I'll be careful with my soapbox here and say, well, I'm a fiduciary, therefore I'm different. No, you're not. Oh, I'm a flat fee, quadro fee, comproprium. No, you're not. You sound exactly the same as everyone else. Whereas when they come in and they meet with myself, or they meet with Micah, they come in and they literally say, Micah, how many times have you had a prospect say in your meeting, I've never met an advisor like you? And they've met a lot of advisors, right? This happens all the time. Because I don't want to try to win the good looks competition. It's not going to work for me, right? I want to win the, wow, this guy or gal showed me more information, more value than anyone. I didn't even know this much value was possible. That's how I want to differentiate myself.
So when we're talking about that value, right, let's talk about some other sources of things and how we make decisions. So when I first started kind of building this, I got into the federal space, which is fantastic. We started a content website. Now, the content website we knew was going to be gold, right? How do we know that? I don't know. We just really felt this was the place to do. We also knew it was a long-term play. So we said, okay, how long are we going to do this before we decide to cut bait? We got to have these measurables inside of there. And the other people on our team did not like that we were doing this content website. They're like, this is a waste of time. It's never going to work. Now it produces the majority of our clients on a recurring basis, right? It does a great job of that, but it's a longer buildup. We also did seminars. Now, when I first started doing seminars, we had a decent amount of people show up for the seminars, which is great. We had a decent amount of people request an appointment, which is great. And I had no clients. Okay, well, a couple of things from this, right? Is it because I'm getting the wrong clientele? Possibly, but that wasn't the case for me. They all looked like ideal clients. I could not close them because I didn't have a system for delivering value and to show them how do you move from a prospect to a client and how do we articulate our value. I had no system for that. And so this was one of those ones that I can't look at this type of event and saying, okay, well, seminars don't work. No, it's not the seminar that doesn't work. It's the Micah that doesn't work. I have to come up with a different system because I didn't know I could just copy someone else's at the time. I had to come up with an own system in order to show how to deliver value to get these people to hire me. So when we're evaluating these things, we got to try to pull our emotions off of it and to say, is this producing results? Where am I losing the people? And is this something I can fix, or is it a bad channel that I need to abandon and I need to move on to something else like social media?
Yeah, for sure. And this is where, and again, we stress this again and again, having someone's system that you can follow, right? You can invent these systems from scratch and it's really hard and it's very expensive and it takes a long time. Or you can go in and say, okay, I'm just going to do what Micah's doing. I'm going to tweak it for my niche. I'm going to adjust it for my personality, whatever the case may be. But then I know that if I fine tune the system enough, it's going to work. Like, not to use this analogy again, but when we go fishing together up in Alaska, you've obviously done quite a bit more fishing than I have, and you catch quite a bit more fish, right? And so, but I'm always kind of watching my corner. All right, what's Micah doing differently than I'm doing? It's at first it's easy to say like, well, Micah's just lucky when it comes to fish. But after like the 100th fish gets pulled in, I'm like, all right, there's got to be more than just luck here. How's he standing? How's he casting? And there's these things, and this applies to advisors, that on the surface it's easy to say, hey, I'm doing it exactly the same as Micah. It feels like that. Oh, he does a seminar, he sees the people, they become clients. Bada bing, bada boom. No, there's so many more things. Is he going around greeting everyone at the beginning of the event? What's his close? How often is he smiling? What jokes is he telling? Like, all of these things make a difference. This goes back, though, to the data. You've got to have the data to see where this thing's breaking down so that we can take one step before that and fix that step.
And you got to be able to look at your meetings, look at your presentation, and have an honest critique of them. And this can be hard. So sometimes bringing in someone else, not sometimes hard, this is hard. Then you can bring in someone else to help critique it as well. And I'm not looking at the 100 things that I can improve. I'm looking for the one thing that I can improve and master. The next time, I'll work on one more thing. And you could say this is an underachiever or whatever, but I want one sticky change at a time in my prospect process. So, okay, great. People are showing up for the seminar. Fantastic. They're saying yes, and they're coming in for an appointment. Fantastic. I am not transitioning them from prospects to client. Okay, that's the only thing I need to work on. Maybe or maybe not, I need to change my seminar pitch. It doesn't sound like it because they're coming in for the first meeting. The sole focus I need to have is what do I say in that meeting in order to convey the value that we're going to bring over the next 24, 36 months of working together. And that's what my focus needs to be.
Yeah, no, that's critical. The other way I like to look at that is how do I make it easier for the prospect to make, I would say, an educated and informed decision. This is one that comes from our good friend, John Barron, who's actually going to be at our Invictus group coaching call later this month. He's going to be joining us in February for our Invictus Mastermind, right? How do I help them make an educated and informed decision? This isn't like, how do I convince them to say yes? I don't want the wrong yes. Educated and informed decision. Are there questions they might have? Can I help them see why I'm different than every advisor? Can I help them see why my fee is worth every penny, right? What can I do to make this easier for them as a consumer versus, I think, Micah, most of people, their prospect process is wear them down until they tap out and say yes, begging for mercy, right? Like, let me keep throwing information at you until you finally give up and out of desperation, you say yes.
Let me show you how smart I am because I know all these terms that you don't know and all these charts that I can throw at, et cetera. And then hopefully you'll hire me because of that. But when the client leaves, they're like, what the hell did he say? I have no idea. Let's just hope he doesn't steal all of our money, right? That's not a solid approach. Yes, we talk about things that clients don't understand. My job is to help make those things simple for them and to dial it down to them. What can they take action on, right? Everyone wants to talk about like the markets and I'm talking about client meetings now, right? Markets and economy, presidential election, what's going to happen. I'll talk about that in concept, but Jarvis, and I know you do the same. I very quickly take this theoretical concept, bring it back down to them, say, Bob and Sue, what does this mean for the two of you? That's our job. And it's the same thing in this prospect process. All of these things are going on. Can they retire? Can they not? How do things set up? Taxes, etc. My job is to dial that down to them. What levers can they control for their retirement?
Yeah, and this is the great irony in it. It's really about saying less. Like the best advisors, whether they're financial advisors or attorneys or any kind of professional, doctors, anybody, the ones that can convey the most complex messages in the simplest of terms, right? This is where, and Micah, you and I have shared these stories as well. Early in our careers, we would see these successful advisors and they would draw these pictures. They would draw on a piece of paper and we say, well, that's dumb. They don't know how to use a computer. They don't know how to do Monte Carlo illustration. And yet they have every client in the world, right? And so it's those things like, how do I take this super complicated, confusing topic that everything I say and every other advisor sounds like the Charlie Brown teacher, like blah, 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 to something they can relate to. Mr. and Mrs. Client, my job is to make sure you never run out of money in retirement. Is that okay with you? Yeah, that's actually exactly what we wanted. Perfect. Well, we have a proven system of success for making that happen. Would you like to know more about that? I would love to know more about that. Okay, perfect. Here we go.
We had to, this is somewhat of a side tangent with the Charlie Brown thing. We had a corporate meeting with one of the companies that we own, and we brought in the majority owner, and we're going through like all the finances and kind of working through it. And she doesn't really enjoy this, but it's like, hey, you need to kind of know what's going on. But the accountant's there, and we're just going back and forth on a bunch of different stuff. And after the meeting, you know, the accountants and the attorneys leave, and we sit down with her, and we just give her a nice little debrief on what the meeting was and what happened. We're like, okay, what'd you hear? She's like, wah, 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 wah. She's like, literally, I was tuned out for most of it, thinking about other things. I have no idea what you guys were talking about. I was like, okay, great. Well, let's dial it down and let's kind of draw a one pager on where we're at right now. Now, is this because she's not smart? Oh, hell no. She's incredibly smart at what she does. This isn't what she does. But the attorney, the accountants, and ourselves in the room, right? We're working on other things that she needs to be present for, but she doesn't quite convey all those things, and getting the CPA and attorney to simplify things just isn't going to happen. Great news. That's our job. We get to come in as the hero right here, right? And say, yeah, I know we talked about a lot of stuff. Let me dial it down and see what this means to you. How does this change affect your personal life? This is why we need to do this. That's the importance of what we do.
Yeah, so complexity is definitely a killer of the prospect process, right? Because either your complexity is just going to wear them down until they say yes out of desperation, or they're just going to leave. And they're going to make their decision based on who was the best looking or had the nicest office or was closest to them, right? The other thing that as you're tracking this, Micah, so that's one reason people would say no, but there are a lot of other reasons. And that's, again, why I want to track anyone who says no, and that's painful to track. Why did they say no, right? What was their stated reason? And then what do you kind of suspect their reason was, right? Their stated reason may be like, yeah, we'll call you back when we have time. Okay. So we have a breakdown there. They don't see the importance of coming back in, right? There's several things,
but
we need to.
There. Yeah.
There's no value at the end of the day. There's no value, right? Or like, hey, the fees are too high, or we can't afford it. No, that's also not it. It's always a shortage of value, right? The value proposition is always off, but we need to track that as well, because that's going to help us identify where we need to improve this process.
So when we're tracking this, right, you kind of have that funnel concept. Everybody can kind of picture that in their mind, and you have your funnel to get them into you. But then after that, you have a funnel that's happening as well. And so then that funnel is saying, okay, from the once they contacted your office electronically, phone call, whatever that is, what is the process that's happening? Now, what you should do is you should have that process kind of lined out where the entire team knows it. And you should be able to put your prospect stats. This is Micah's ideal world. Your prospect stats on top of that. Where do you lose them? Right? We have a decent loss from when people contact our office to scheduling an appointment because we charge a $500 fee. Okay, well, we have a loss there. Well, at the end of the day, we're still bringing on as many ideal clients as we like to have. So we could say, well, we're going to waive the fee. Well, the reason we put the fee there is to get out the do-it-yourselfers, to get out the looky-loos, right? That's our filter mechanism that's there. But okay, we have a drop right there. Why do we have it? Then from that, do they get us the documents? Do they respond to the emails when they come in for the meeting? Then there's a whole filter, Jarvis, in the meeting. It says you as the advisor should be able to look at this and say, where did you lose them in the conversation? Right? It's going to start off with a chit chat. Then what questions do they have? Right? Then outlining the agenda, right? And asking them some questions in this meeting. Where are you going to lose them? Where you lose them, you should mark that down on your homework sheet. Be like, okay, I lost them right here. Is this a one-off? Is this a common thing? And what part of my presentation do I need to change?
That's right. And the losing them is their body language shuts down. Yes. They start disagreeing. They quit engaging. They're kind of looking at their watch, right? They're checking out. They're ready to go. So yeah, you've definitely got to watch this. And again, I want to stress, this doesn't need to be a complicated, elaborate system, right? Especially for most of our listeners, right, are smaller offices, right? It's a spreadsheet, and it's where they add in the process. Step one, step two, right? Initial call, first meeting, second meeting, whatever your 3 or 4 steps are. Yeah. Where are they at? And then we quit hearing from them here. Okay, perfect. Something, Micah, we ran into is with our sleep audit process, we initially, I've heard this from other advisors, people wouldn't call us back to schedule another meeting. I would see this breakdown. Yes. Okay, perfect. So then at the end of the meeting, after I presented the one-page financial plan, we have a great masterclass on that. I would say, hey, great news, you're going to go home and you're going to think of a couple of questions. And some of them are going to be big and some of them might seem silly. I promise you none of them are silly. So what we're going to do is on our way out, we're going to stop by Colleen's desk. She's going to schedule a time for you to come back in so that we can answer any questions that you have. Is that okay with you? Oh, Matthew, that'd be great. So Colleen schedules them. They usually come back in with one question. It's usually just a throwaway question. Then we're good to roll. We have paperwork ready and off we go. But it was because I watched that and we looked at our spreadsheet. All right, we presented the one-page financial plan. We never heard from them again. All right, let's make that easier. Let's make it easier for them to say yes versus, and this seems like it's not a hard thing, but it is a hard thing for someone to pick up the phone and call you. There's a psychological barrier there. Let me take away that barrier.
Well, I got to get with my wife. What's her calendar doing? What's our family calendar? What's the kids'
telephone
calendar?
Number? Yeah.
All of those things come up, right? Versus when we're both right there in the office, it's easier. It's great. We both pull out our calendars right now. We can solve this right in 2 minutes, and then we can walk off and we're there. And it feels like a solid value add, by the way. Because think about the way Jarvis said this. Hey, I know when you get home, you're going to have questions, which, by the way, they're not saying, but in the back of their mind, they know that.
Yeah.
Whether they met with a financial advisor before or not, they met with some other professional that when they got home, when they got in the car, as soon as they left, when they put their head down on the pillow at night, they're like, oh crap, I really wish I would have asked him X because I don't understand this, blah, 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 blah. And Jarvis, you just solved that pain point. When they put their head on the pillow at night and they're like, man, I wish I would have, oh wait, next week we're going to meet with them. Okay, well, I'm going to write that down. And Jarvis, I like to add to that and I want to make sure our receptionist does as well. When you have questions, you're probably going to forget them by the time we have the meeting. So take just a second, shoot us an email, right? And we will add that to our agenda for you. Now, most of our clients don't take us up on that.
Nope.
All of our clients love that we do that because I'm like, hey, middle of the night, you have a question, something comes up, you're like, oh man, I want to remember this to Micah. I know you're going to forget it because that's what I would do as well.
Yeah.
Just take a quick second, shoot us an email. We'll add it to our agenda. We'll make sure it gets tended to. So again, what can you do to make this process easy for them?
Yeah, and there's so many little steps in between. You mentioned the receptionist, something we implemented years ago. When the receptionist is greeting people, taking them back to the office, whether that's physical office or in Zoom, always adds in there, great news, you're going to love meeting with Matthew. Right now, I can't say that. If I sit down the meeting, I say, hey, Micah, great news, you're going to love meeting with me today. That doesn't come off quite right. You will, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there. But for them to say that, right? Now, you might think to yourself, and I used to think, well, like, oh, that's really cheesy. That's really salesy. Is it true? Yes, it is. I'm very good at my meetings. And is there anything wrong with Colleen saying, my relationship manager saying, hey, listen, you're going to love me with that? No, there's not. It's planting that seed. It's setting that stage, right? Because otherwise they're coming in and they're saying like, I don't know how this is going to go. Is this guy an idiot? Are we going to get the hard sell? Is he going to make us feel dumb? Whatever the case may be. You know what? You're going to love meeting with Matthew. You're going to love meeting with him, right? So these little things can make so much difference in your prospect process. But if you're not having any breakdown there, we don't need to, that would be unnecessary. Like save that ammunition for where you're having a breakdown.
Yeah, and this all go back to knowing your numbers in each one of these. And as we get into action items, that's what I'm going to say our first action item
100%.
is, right? Is break this down. Now, if you don't have a more elaborate process, kind of like we have, it could be even too elaborate. It doesn't matter. What's step 1, 2, and 3? They call the office and set appointment. They have the appointment and then the follow-up. There's 3 steps. Great. On those 3 steps, where's your conversion with those? And also then step 2 of this in the homework, so I'm going to give 2 action items out right at once. The second one is on the prospecting side, where do your clients come from? Now, notice what I'm saying. I didn't ask where do your prospects come from. I said, where do your clients come from? This is a big distinction, right? I want to know who are my ideal clients and what sources did they come from. That's the place I want to spend my time and energy.
Yeah, that's so critical. We talked on another podcast, Micah, that you and I had a lead engine at one point we tried, and it generated like 90 appointment requests and 0 clients. So at first we're like, this is the best. This is the best marketing thing. 90 people asked for appointments. That's incredible. 0 clients from that. Okay, that's not a good channel, right? So it's where clients come from. For our coaching program members, our Backstage Pass and Invictus members, there are several recorded webinars, Micah, that you and I have done on the prospect process, on the one-page financial plan. Super valuable. For all of our listeners, we will be doing a webinar on how to double your practice in the next 3 years. It's a stretch goal for sure. It's something that we've done repeatedly, and we've helped a lot of people do.
Ooh, fantastic. Well, Jarvis, is always a pleasure. Always fun to get up on step. I can't wait to dive into this even more, especially for our members. But until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning. Hey, before you leave, a quick word from our sponsors. Hey, everybody, I want you to take a quick look around your office, and on your desk, there should be the Retirement Tax Services Desktop Tax Guide. And if it's not there, or if it's not current, meaning you didn't download it in the last month, go to retirementtaxservices.com and download the Desktop Tax Guide. This is a must-have resource for every financial advisor committed to tax planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't